Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome again to the Daily Financial Wellness broadcast brought to you from COPEC. And again, we are very pleased to have Mike Schoedinger from the Schoedinger Funeral Home and Cremation Services with us. I'll be introducing Mike just in a few minutes. But just a reminder for anybody that's new to our program, we do have the program every day starting at 2 o'clock. And the presenter will present from about 2 to 2:30. And then following that, there will be a question and answer period. We invite questions at any point along the way, but we'll particularly leave the lines open starting at 2:30 for additional questions. My name is Jerry Snyder, and I'm going to be your host today. You might often hear Jay Lindner as well, who also helps host the programs. And since a number of our speakers are involved with the financial service industry, and they also, some are which sit on the board of directors of COPEC, we need to take a few minutes and provide disclosures to that effect. So I'm actually going to be silent for a minute and give people a chance to look this over, and then I'll join you very briefly. Well, thank you for your patience. For those, again, joining us for the first time, the programs are brought to you by COPEC. COPEC is a nonprofit organization started back in 2004, and its entire mission is to provide no-cost educational programs such as we're doing today. And there's no attempt at sales or any marketing that you will be exposed to. Of course, these are live stream programs, as I mentioned, daily. Occasionally, we'll have a little connectivity problem. If that's to occur, please be patient. We'll get things up and running again. Hopefully, that won't occur. And so we do programs daily, except maybe around holidays. So we will take the holidays off. And by the way, if you do enjoy the programs and you want to share those with others that may benefit, please feel free to do so, and you can do that through the website. We'll show the website location a number of times, copeceducation.org, and also on the right of the screen here, you'll see the many speakers that we do have involved with COPEC and their expertise and the programs that they're going to be offering. So when you do go into the website, which is the financial wellness portal of the financialeducation.org website, you'll see a number of tiles, and I want to bring your attention to those. Obviously, the first one shows the daily programs, and we do schedule those out. In fact, I think we schedule them out for the entire year, so you can see each and every day's program, and we have that featured by month, so you can pull up a whole monthly calendar. Of course, we'd like you to be there every day with us, but there may be certain programs that you want to focus in on, so you can look ahead and accomplish that. Another tile is Retirement Decisions. That's a program geared strictly to retirement, and we get into in-depth discussions of all aspects of retirement, including many of the state pension funds as well. And also bring to your attention what we call Financial Fridays. Those are actually more of a lecture series, and every Friday there's a different topic, and it gives us time to get in depth. The speaker can get in depth for a 50-minute program. And then, like I mentioned before, if you are a part of an organization, maybe you're part of the nonprofit organization that would benefit by these similar programs, then please contact us and we'll discuss setting that up for your particular organization. And then very importantly also, one of the tiles allows you to access 15-minute consultations with many or most of the speakers that are presenting. That's an individual consultation. Maybe you have an individual situation or more of a private situation you'd like to discuss. So by accessing that tab, you can accomplish an individual consultation. So without further ado, I want to bring back Mike and have him talk to us. Mike, I hear a lot about the third and fourth generation of Schoedinger. I've always wanted to ask you this. Are you the third or the fourth generation?
Jerry, I am neither. They're all dead.
Oh, goodness.
The fifth and sixth generations are living, my dad and my uncle.
Oh,
And
wow.
I am part of the sixth generation. And this summer, for the first time ever, the seventh generation sought employment. We had 2 college kids working at the funeral home this summer. So that was kind of fun.
Hey, I appreciate the update on that. That's great. So what are you going to talk to us about today, Mike?
Well, I am going to start sharing my screen here, and I will talk a little bit about pre-planning funerals. And I love getting people's attention right out of the gate. So I've got a little opening slide there that I love. One of my colleagues in Albuquerque, New Mexico, uses this to get everyone's attention. But I would love it if people, as I'm talking, if you have a question, I believe you can use the chat feature and type it in. And if I notice it or Jerry notices it, it won't offend me if you interrupt me. I'd love to answer your questions as you think about them. Real quick, the history of our company goes back to 1855. And my great-great-great-grandpa was a wood craftsman and cabinet maker and made coffins. And that turned into today Ohio's largest funeral home. That's our hearse and a coffin. We use caskets today, but that's a picture of a coffin. And you can see we are on South High Street there. Today we serve over 10,000 families a year with pets and humans. We have a new location being built in Dublin as we speak, and funeral homes throughout Central Ohio. So, I believe our role as funeral directors is to help obviously care for the deceased, do a lot of the legal paperwork and newspaper notices and Social Security and veterans benefits. But the bottom line is my favorite thing that I like to do at the very bottom is creating a healing experience. When I started in the business 30 years ago, ministers did the healing. And most of us had a relationship with a church, and we had a relationship with a pastor, and they took care of the grief component. And today, only about a third of folks really have a relationship with a pastor that allows them to get that grief support. And so that role has fallen on the few funeral homes that have really figured out that that's part of their job now, not just dealing with the dead person, but also with the living people. So what we're going to talk about today is why you should pre-plan. And I love to ask the question, does anybody know today what the mortality rate is? And I like to see if there's hands up in the air. And the answer is it's 100%. We're all going to die. And so it's like a life insurance salesman that says, you're going to need my product someday. I'm the same way. The average life expectancy is creeping up to 80 now. Ironically, the gap between when men die and women die was 7 years when I started, and now it's down to 5. So that's an interesting statistic. A woman's life expectancy makes it a real possibility that she will be in charge of her husband's funeral and also have to be in charge of the finances of the family, something a lot of women aren't doing these days. And then worse yet, having to make decisions, expensive decisions about funerals by herself. People retiring early, investment accounts being used up. You hear about the senior citizens working at Walmart and McDonald's for some extra spending money. It's because, all the forecasts when those folks all started working and retiring was you're going to retire at 60 or 65 and you'll be dead at 70 or 72. And that's what the forecasts were. And today we know that's not the case. So we do not want you to leave your family with a financial burden. We want you to give your family peace of mind. And so today we're going to talk about how we do that. Living in a nursing home can cost $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month. And the latest statistics I've seen through the Medicaid department are about 40% of us will spend some time in a skilled facility getting care. And
Hey,
those are,
Mike,
yes.
um, we have a number of clients that are spending about $8,000 to $9,000 a month
Oh, really?
in some of our local facilities, the higher level of care. So even
Wow.
that's maybe gone up from some of these slides, but
Yeah, they have. I haven't seen 9,000 a month, but I believe it.
yeah.
Um, So 50% of all couples and 70% of single persons supposedly can become impoverished within 1 year of entering a nursing home. Um, so why not pre-plan? Well, I don't know what I want. I don't know if I want to be cremated. I don't know if I want to be buried. I don't know if I want to be buried in the family plot. What happens if I change my mind? What happens if I move? Um, and some people think that we sit on funeral home, sits on the money. In Ohio, I'll get to this later, but in Ohio, when you pre-plan your funeral, we are not allowed to keep any of the money by law. It all gets put with a third party financial vehicle. Um, don't think that about your money. But these are some of the reasons why people haven't pre-planned. Um, I think people really believe it's important to declare what they want. I know it's not a conversation many of us want to have with our kids. Hey, kids, come over for dinner, and Dad and I want to talk about our funerals with you. But I will assure you that those that do it are glad they did it. It is a very good relief to know that a lot of these things are behind us. And also knowing how it's going to be paid for is a great thing to know. I don't know what percentage of people own life insurance, but most people, when they took their life insurance out, it wasn't to pay for their funeral. It was to pay for other things. So we don't want to use up all of your life insurance proceeds on a funeral.
Mike, I might mention too, since you brought it up, we have some other programs that are designed to help people know how to have those conversations. So those are additional programs that kind of fit into that statement.
Yeah. The calendar, we'll have to look at the calendar and see when those are coming up.
Yeah.
The important thing we want to do is make sure you declare what you want. Hopefully it's in alignment with your family and your children. We want to avoid emotional overspending. We want to avoid conflicts. Cremation, a lot of times the family agrees on cremation, but they don't agree on what to do with the cremated remains. We want to scatter mom here. We want to scatter dad here. I think he wants to be buried on the family plot. So those are the kind of things we talk about and encourage families to decide. The good news is you can always change your mind. If you sit down with a funeral director in 2020 and plan everything, and 10 years from now you've changed your mind, well, you can change it all you want. You can change everything right up to the day of the funeral. Then we kind of got to be setting our decisions. And we'll talk about how they're transferable to other funeral homes, so your money's not held hostage and so forth. 63% of people believe that they have made some arrangements, and yet 72% of people, I think it's believe that pre-planning is a good idea. And yet when I ask people, that says over half the people have prearranged their funeral. And I know that's not true because we serve thousands of people a year and only about 40% of our deaths are actually prearranged. But what this means is they get asked these questions in a survey, and it means that they have a family plot at the so-and-so cemetery, and that means they've pre-planned everything. And that's only one of 100 things that have to be decided. So this is, just a graph to show you the increasing popularity of pre-planning your funeral. And like I said, there's almost 100 things that are decided on at a funeral. And you go, how can that be? Well, I like to ask people when they're engaged, how long are you engaged for before you get married? And the most common answer is a year. And I say, well, why do you take a year to plan a wedding? Well, there's just 100 things to take care of. Yeah. Well, believe it or not, those exact same 100 things that you have for a wedding, you have for a funeral. Instead of pallbearers, it's bridesmaids. You still have music. You still have a minister. You still have a reception after. Instead of a honeymoon, it's a cemetery where you're going to be buried. It's just, they're a little different, but they're really the same. And I know when I got married, I sat down with the wedding coordinator at our church, had an 1.5-hour meeting, and we got done. I put my fiance back in the car and said, now you know what I do for a living. And she went, what? And I said, that same worksheet that she filled out is the same worksheet I fill out. Just the questions are a little different, but they're the same intent. And so there literally are 100 decisions. Some of the ones that are big in the beginning: what funeral home do you want? What can you afford to pay? Or if you buy things ahead of time, are prices guaranteed? What happens if I change? Who pays the taxes every year on my money? Am I protected against inflation? Medicaid, I want to be protected from Medicaid. Well, the good news is when you sit down and meet with a funeral director to pre-plan your funeral, all these questions hopefully will get answered. I know they get answered at Schoedinger. Most Americans would prefer to work with a local, independent, family-owned and operated funeral home. And yet almost 25% of the funeral homes in America are operated by big, large national conglomerates that are based out of Texas or New Orleans or whatever. So it's important to find out, is your funeral home that you think you want to work with a local family-owned funeral home? And I believe pre-planning your funeral is a two-step process. Number one is creating that funeral plan, answering those 100 questions, having us document what those decisions are. If you say, well, I don't know the answer yet, we write it down. You go back, you talk to your family, you call us back up and say, okay, I decided I want a pink casket instead of a purple casket, or I want My Way to be sung by Elvis and not Frank Sinatra. Okay, we'll write it down. And then step two is we give you a cost estimate of what everything would cost in today's prices, and you decide if you want to pay for it. You can either make one payment or you can make payments for up to 10 years every month. A quote we got back on one of our surveys that really hit me: if every woman knew what every widow knows, meaning their husband has just died, everyone would have made a prearrangement. My husband and I felt a little uncomfortable discussing our funerals, especially since we had so much life left in front of us. But afterward, it seemed like a weight had been lifted off our shoulders. It was one less thing we and our children had to worry about. I will tell you that today, life is less guaranteed than it's ever been in my career. We are at record rates of death with COVID. We are at a significant increase in suicide deaths and overdose deaths. And none of those usually have any planning to them. They're all unexpected deaths. So you add the normal deaths that are, we all know we're going to have, people dying of cancer, old age, whatever. And then you add all these surprise deaths, and it validates the importance of pre-planning. So should you prepay? I believe so. At Schoedinger, what we do is we deposit your money with the Ohio Funeral Directors Trust or an insurance company, depending on what's best for you. We guarantee your funeral at today's prices. So you're never going to owe any more money. If you live 10, 20, 30 years and your funeral triples in price, you don't owe any more money. And our policies, our contracts are exempt from Medicaid. So if you have $100,000 in your nursing home account, in your bank account, and to Jerry's point, you're spending $8,000 a month, and in a year that's going to be gone, and then your loved one's going to go on Medicaid. When you prepay your funeral, you can spend as much money on your funeral as you want. There's no limit, and it is an exempt asset. So if you put $10,000 or $20,000 into your funeral plan, and now your $100,000 in the bank goes down to 80 or 90, it is exempt. The government can't take it from you, and you may just end up going on Medicaid a month earlier. So that's one of the biggest reasons why people prepay. But what you have to do to make it exempt from Medicaid is make it irrevocable. And that's just putting your initials on the line. When you pre-plan your funeral, by nature, it's revocable. You can call us back up and say, I want my money back. And years down the road, we cancel your contract, you get your money back. But to go on Medicaid, you have to make it irrevocable, meaning you can never get your money back. The government has to know you've given that money away. You can't commit Medicaid fraud and go on Medicaid and then cancel your policy and get all that money back. It's got to be irrevocable. It can be transferred. Ohio is a freedom of choice state. You pre-plan your funeral at Schoedinger or anywhere else, and you move to Florida. You don't want to do business with Schoedinger anymore. we have to send your policy and your money to the next funeral home. That is not true in other states, especially Florida. Florida, people go down there all the time. They get the Valpak coupon, buy one, get one free at Acme Funeral Service. They do it. The first one dies and they're back in Ohio, and we call down to the Florida funeral and say, hey, Joe bought a plan with you years ago and he ended up dying up here and he's not going to use it. Will you send us the money? And they say, to use it or lose it. It's just awful. I early in my career called the attorney general down there, tried to make a big stink, and he's like, if you want to change it, you got to change the laws. Right now, where nobody's doing anything wrong, this is what Florida law says, and it's terrible. So I always tell people, don't pre-plan your funeral unless you know you can get it back. And in Ohio, you can. And all the taxes are paid by the trust. You don't ever pay any, you basically are getting a tax-free investment. So that's a really good thing. Let's see here, time check. We are almost to the end. Questions to ask. The funeral home, does it own and operate its own crematory? Most funeral homes don't have a crematory. They're very expensive. We have 4. And most of the other funeral homes in town have to bring their cremations to those of us that have a crematory. That just adds another layer of risk that I don't believe in. The fraud that's been committed in the United States around cremation all occurred when a funeral home didn't own a crematory. I just think that you should take your loved ones to a funeral that has one. Are their facilities modern and convenient? Do they have payment plans? Do they have a guarantee? All those are questions that are good to ask when looking into a funeral home.
Mike, again, just to clarify, we actually have maybe eight or so minutes.
Okay. Yep, I'm good.
Okay.
Just some other advanced directives that, in case you're not familiar with them, most people are, but documents that help you convey your decisions about how you want your end of life care to be. Living wills say, this is what I want done to me if I start losing my quality of life. A durable power of attorney is something that actually appoints a person to act on your behalf when you're no longer able to. You've had a stroke, you're no longer competent to make your own health decisions. This names a person to do that. DNRs, do not resuscitate orders. You put in there when you want these in effect, when not, what conditions your body has to be in to trigger this document. Ethical wills, something people aren't necessarily familiar with, but it's kind of a way of sharing your values and your blessings and your dreams and your advice for your family and friends. Some people use it as a forgiveness vehicle. They're not able to talk about hurt feelings or anger at relatives, and they write it in an ethical will. It's not a legal document, but a lot of people use these to share their thoughts with their survivors. It's kind of a voice of the heart, a love letter to your family, where you, like I mentioned, you talk about what your values are. How did you grow up? What did your grandpa teach you? I remember my grandpa used to say, Michael, you're no better than anybody else. We both put our pants on one leg at a time. And I always thought, well, that's the silliest thing, but I still remember it years and years later. Spiritual values, advice you have for future generations, can just be a way of writing about love or forgiveness. So that's kind of what an ethical will is. There's an actual website, ethicalwill.org or .com, I can't remember. But these are some of the reasons why people do them. We want to be remembered. We want to leave something behind. We want to put the facts of a story and document them because the story keeps getting told and gets more and more exaggerated. And I've heard from people that have done these, you learn more about yourself than you do the people that read it. And my parents are actually doing this as we speak. And it's fun to hear my mom and dad talk about what they're getting out of it as they write it. This is a new form in Ohio. Very few states have this, but it allows you to name somebody to be in charge of your funeral. It's not a power of attorney because powers of attorney end at death. This is an appointment of representative. So if you're not married, if your legal next of kin is not the person you want to be in charge of your funeral, if you have 4 kids, they're all equal next of kin, And just because the oldest is the smartest or the most competent doesn't mean he's in charge or she's in charge. This lets you name that person. A lot of people in a gay relationship, if they're not legally married, but they've been together for 20 years, this lets you name your partner to be in charge of your funeral. It doesn't have any other powers. It doesn't control any money. It doesn't control your assets. It's one power. They get to pick what kind of funeral you want. And we have these available for free on our website if anybody would want to see one. It's just a 2-page document. Advanced planning, we've talked about. And I talked a little bit about this, the different levels from pre-planning everything to prepaying everything. I believe it's important because you get to do it together versus alone. The impact of inflation by shedding or guaranteeing the prices, being able to make payments. You can, if you can't afford a $10,000 funeral, you can start making payments on it now, and hopefully it's paid for by the time you die. So the most important thing is that your funeral is affordable, that your funeral is convenient, and that it's very meaningful. And so that's kind of our goal, to have each of our services create that healing experience that represents all three of those. Here's some pictures of those that I always like to show people. Bottom right's my favorite, where literally the funeral was at OHIO and the guy in the casket was the I, his family. That was actually printed in the dispatch. Kind of an interesting thing. Different kinds of funeral providers out there, be careful. There are full service funeral providers like Schoedinger Funeral, and then there are those that only offer limited services. They try and compete on price. And that's fine if you only need that simple limited thing. Most of those low-cost folks aren't local. They're not family-owned businesses here in Columbus. They don't have guarantees. They're not open on weekends or nights. They've got to do what they got to do to stay low cost. But they do exist, and they serve some families that want those types of services. The main thing is that funerals are for the living. They're not about you and what you want. You've got to remember to help and honor what your family's needs are. My favorite quote's a funeral director in Michigan who says, "A good funeral gets the dead where they need to go, and you get the living where they need to be." And so I've always loved that. And my last slide is, I get asked a lot, Jerry, how do you guys deal with such intense emotions and all the stress that you have? And I say, well, at night when everyone goes home, we play casket Jenga. And so
That's good.
Anyway, that is my presentation.
Well, again, I'd like to thank you, and I know you're going to be back with us at least once a month. You've volunteered a number of other programs, which we really appreciate. So,
yeah.
And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Reminder to join us tomorrow and join us for the rest of the week and into the future. So,
all right, goodbye,
thanks
everybody.
so much. We'll talk to you all later. Thank you.